one, medical marijuana, and two, the industrial hemp. We are going to be presenting questions, referendum questions that we would like to have public comment on. We can either do that at the conclusion of our presentation, or we could do it right now. Basically, what the questions are going to ask is, should the St. Regis Mohawk tribe explore options to legalize, license, and regulate the cultivation, production, and distribution of medical marijuana? And for the industrial hemp side, it would basically be the same question, and it will read, should the St. Regis Mohawk tribe explore the options to legalize, license, regulate, and regulate the cultivation, production, and distribution of industrial hemp? There are some other things in the referendum questions. I believe these will be available at the end of the meeting, and we're going to host like a 30-day comment period for questions, concerns, and we plan on having a referendum in late fall or like early winter, no later than near the end of December. We plan on having extensive meetings on this because there are a lot of issues concerned that come with the distribution and the cultivation of medical marijuana and industrial hemp. So we want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what is in store should the tribe go down this route, should the people vote this either yes or no. So Chief Thompson would like to say a few words. He's been spearheading this action almost from the time that he got on council. We did attend a couple of presentations at NFOA on medical marijuana, and there seems to be, like if you're in Colorado or Washington, it's great. But anywhere else in the country, it's not an industry, where you think you're going to get into it and make millions. You might make hundreds in the beginning, but and some of the presenters that we're going to have here today are going to hopefully open your eyes. We had a very sobering conversation yesterday, and we had agreed to bring some of the presenters here as part of the information process that we're going to do. We're going to have presenters from the community who are interested in getting into medical marijuana and or industrial hemp in the future. So we're not closing you out at this meeting. This is more of an informational meeting to bring along the information that we have gathered. So Chief Thompson?
Is this what I use?
No, you can use that. I'm just going to keep that close.
I'll grab it like this. So the issue of medical marijuana and the legalization thereof came up in 2004. I think there's been a history there in different states. There was been a movement to decriminalize and legalize marijuana for years, and it's gone to the West Coast and to the East. But in 2014, it really became a reality for tribes because of the DOJ memo that was released that gave guidance to internal policy regarding legalization of marijuana due to the development of it in the western states, I believe. And there was a furor. There was a really large response in Indian country to these memos. There were people that interpreted them pretty much willy-nilly at first. There were it was carte blanche interpretations, and basically the interpretation that we could pretty much do what we want. It was decriminalized. It wasn't going to be regulated. These were lay opinions. It was basically from the ground up. As we became educated on it, it became clear that there was a lot of gray area. There were some very bright lines as to what could and couldn't be done in some areas. I think that while I was running, it reached a momentum where Indian organizations were becoming more educated on this, and that was one of the issues that I ran on, was exploring this as a potential revenue stream for the tribe. I think that where we are now, from introducing it at the tribal council table, we've come a long way. We've had, I think, at the council table, some of the reactions that we have all had, knee-jerk reactions. Either they say yes or no. But we've educated ourselves by attending conferences on this issue and having legal memorandums drafted for us on this issue to better understand it, because it's a very dynamic area. There's different facets. There's legal facets, there's financial facets, there's economic facets. It's a really interesting field. But our intent and where we are today is to present questions to the community objectively, to weigh the risks, to weigh the rewards, and to present this question, put it to the community, and allow the community to decide this. On the issue of the questions, the questions will be released today, but we'll have a 30-day period for comment only. We have not adopted the question as being the official question that will be asked as of yet. There'll be a 30-day comment period to be received from the community on this, which we will look forward to hear. I think we would like to engage in a discussion on these issues to better educate everybody on the issues, on all of the pros and cons. So I'm happy to say where we are today. The question will be put to the community in the winter, late fall, early winter, and we will decide. There's two issues. There's the medical marijuana and the industrial hemp. Both have pros and cons, I guess, attached to them. One more than the other. But I think that the aim of the presentations today is to give an objective backdrop to what we're dealing with here, and give good information for the community to take, digest, and think about. So with that, I'll hand it back over to the chair.
So first up, we are going to hear from Lael.
Joe.
Okay. Actually, we're going to hear from Joe Stevens. He's from Etain Industries, and he's been in the medical marijuana business for about 10 years. We spoke with him yesterday. He has experience in basically from the ground floor up in New Jersey when they started to go down this route of medical marijuana. He works with, we have a lobbyist who has a client, and he works with them. So I'm going to welcome Mr. Stevens to the floor.
Hi everyone, how are you? Thanks for the introduction. I'm Joe Stevens. I work with Etain.
You might have to hold it closer.
I'm Joe Stevens. I work with Etain Health in New York. I was the first licensed dispensary cultivation facility in New Jersey. I since exited New Jersey. Now I'm working with the Peckham family in New York. Right now I'm going to give a quick PowerPoint presentation on the marijuana program in New York. I just want to hold this up.
Shall I put that more
So the New York market, New York is the most regulated medical marijuana program in the nation. New Jersey was the first. Then I worked in Connecticut, which that was the most regulated. Now New York took New Jersey regulations and Connecticut regulations, combined them to make it the most restrictive in the nation. the New York market, to become a patient, there's 10 qualifying diseases and 5 qualifying symptoms. The diseases are cancer, HIV and AIDS, ALS, Parkinson's, MS, spinal cord injury, epilepsy, inflammatory bowel disease, neuropathy, and Huntington's disease. Not only do you have to have the disease, you also have to have symptoms related to the disease. So if you go to your doctor and you're diagnosed with cancer and you don't have a related symptom, the doctor won't prescribe medical marijuana for you. So it's very difficult to receive a card in New York. As a patient, you have to find a physician. Right now, there's roughly 600 registered physicians that prescribe medical marijuana in New York. There's no list of physicians, so it's difficult to find one actually participating in the program. And a lot of doctors aren't taking on patients. They're only seeing existing patients who prescribe marijuana.
Joe, if you can hold that a little closer, please.
Sure. Sorry. So a lot of the doctors aren't taking on new patients. So if you do happen to find a doctor and you weren't with them, they won't admit you to the practice just for medical marijuana because they're afraid of the state coming in and taking their license for prescribing to too many patients. Once you do find a doctor, you have to have 2 visits. You have to have a bona fide doctor-patient relationship. Right now, doctors are charging between $500 and $900 a visit. Insurance doesn't cover medical marijuana, so it's all cash out of pocket for people. So it's an expensive program to begin, and medication in New York is very expensive. Once the patient has a recommendation from a doctor, they go online with the state, you register, pay $50, then you can become a registered patient, visit one of our dispensaries, and begin to receive marijuana. There's 5 medical licenses right now in the state. We're one of the 5. In April of 2015, the state put out RFPs. It was a lengthy application process, and the application was between 1,000 to 8,000 pages long. Our license was issued July of 2015. It's a vertically integrated program, meaning you have to cultivate, manufacture, and distribute marijuana. There's no wholesaling to other organizations in New York. All product has to be oil-based, so it's not traditional flower or bud that you'll see on the street and rolling marijuana into the joint form. It's more pills, tinctures, and vaporized form. Again, it's one of the most restrictive in the nation. The requirements for operation in terms of staff is you have to have a person with good agriculture practices certified and working in the industry for at least 1 year. On the manufacturing end, 1 employee with QA/QC experience, an employee with good manufacturing practice experience, and inventory experience, all 1-year experience. And each dispensary has to have a registered pharmacist on staff at all times. That's where we see the biggest challenge in terms of overhead. They're 10% of our operating costs. Pharmacists are very expensive to staff. And then our cultivation, in terms of your cultivation setup, it has to be in a warehouse or greenhouse. There's no outdoor growing allowed. Any type of ingredients you use in your plant, from nutrients to soil enhancement, has to be approved by the DOH before you're allowed to use that, and no pesticides are allowed in New York. Overhead on a small facility that can service about 1,000 patients a year. That's a 3,000 square foot greenhouse with a small manufacturing facility to create your pharmaceutical grade products. It's roughly $350,000 for the greenhouse. The lights are roughly $1,000 upfront cost. That's between 20 to 50 lights at $1,000 per light. Each plant cost runs between $50 through harvest. It's very labor intensive. We see our overhead per greenhouse greenhouse is about $10,000 to $15,000 a month. And there's large utility uses such as water, electric, propane, and gas for heating the greenhouses. In the manufacturing end of the New York operation, again, you're not allowed to sell flower, so it all has to be extracted. New York allows for alcohol extraction and CO2 extraction only. CO2 extraction is very clean, it's efficient, not like other states where you can use butane or propane. That's been outlawed in New York because of residue. There's harmful residue that comes along with those volatile solvents. CO2 is a very clean process, very expensive to set up in the beginning, but it allows for a pharmaceutical grade product. Again, it's all oil-based. There's no edible allowed, such as cookies and candies. It has to be in a pill form, a vaporizer form, or a tincture or a mucosal form. And again, no flower is allowed for sale in New York. All product must undergo rigorous third-party testing. Right now, the state set up a testing center. All product before it's distributed has to go in, has to be tested for potency, how much THC is in the medication, and CBD. There's a plus or 5% margin, so if you create one product today, it has to stay consistent throughout the life of the product. If it comes in under 5 or over 5% plus or minus, the state flags that product. We're not allowed to sell it. So there is a high level of waste in this program where the state will say we're not allowed to sell this product because you didn't come in within that 5 to 10% margin. The state just began the testing center, so they really don't know what they're doing. So there's a lot of back and forth. It's challenging to put out a product within these margins. Again, overhead it's expensive. New York's an expensive state. It's about the extraction equipment is roughly $250,000 upfront cost, and then the remaining equipment for your labs anywhere from $250,000 to $750,000, depending on the size of your facility. All added ingredients has to be pharmaceutical grade. If there's any additives you're going to use in your product, such as MCT, propylene glycol, glycerin, things of that nature, it all has to be pharmaceutical grade. Security is very intense, very restricted. There's 24-hour security monitoring of all our facilities, video cameras throughout, and you have to store 90 days of footage. The state has 24-hour-a-day access to the footage. They're basically always watching. You're required to have internet and cellular service at each site. Also, 2 security companies has to monitor your security equipment. So traditionally you only use one. The state wants 2. Seed to sale tracking from plum to sale, so everything that you're growing has to be tracked, audited once a week through the full process, so from seed to sale. Transportation to our dispensaries, the state spells it out. You have to have a vehicle, 2 people in that vehicle at all times, secure transportation in a secure lockbox, the product being sent to your dispensaries, and you have to give the state 48-hour notice before any type of delivery can occur, and 1 person has to stay in the vehicle at all times. So again, that's a little restrictive in terms of inventory management, trying to figure out how much product's needed for a week. It's difficult because the state, like I said, requires 48 hours notice before any type of transport can go through. And then just a quick overview is the program's very challenging. It's a high startup cost, anywhere from $3 million to $5 million for a small facility, and again, to service about 1,000 patients a month. High cost of operations, it's highly regulated, and it's a very limited market. Right now, there's roughly 6,000 patients in the state of 20 million. Of that 6,000, there's 3,000 patients that are participating. We see about a 50% loss of our patient base on a monthly basis. because of the high cost of medication. Traditionally, in the black market, a product will be anywhere from $50 to $100. In New York, we're selling product at the dispensary from anywhere from $180 to $240. So we lose a lot of patients to the black market, and also about 10% of our patients from death from their condition, and then another 5% due to the fact that patients feel the medication isn't doing anything for them. So very limited marketing. Some other challenges we see is banking. Banks come in, you try to do banking, they shut down your accounts. Any vendors you're working with for supply, grow supplies, ingredient supplies to manufacture your product, even servicing on your equipment. Once they find out you're in the medical marijuana industry, they shut down your accounts. So that's another challenge within this organization. Just like I said, a quick overview. If anyone has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Really? Scotty and then Russell, or Russell and then Scotty and then Elma?
How many jobs did all that make?
Right now, we have about 30 employees at our facility. 15 are part-time, trimmers during harvest time, and then another 15 full-time. Right now, our operational budget is $500,000 a month. That's our burn rate, and our income is about $180,000 a month. So there is a high burn rate. We've been operational 18 months. I advise the Peckhams and the other board members at the organization to close the doors, but they want to stick this out. They're there for the patient. They see the benefits for the patient, but financially, I'm asking to cut costs, cut employees, cut wherever we can, so we can survive for the next 2 to 3 years before the market opens.
They have, how many, you have 3 buildings, right? It's not just one building, you have the...
No, right now we have a cultivation facility. That's the grow side of that facility is 12,000 square feet. The manufacturing facility, which is 8,000 square feet. And then we have 4 dispensaries spread out through New York. 1 in Yonkers, 1 in Kingston, Albany, and Syracuse. The concentration of patients, 50% of those 3,000 patients are located in the 5 boroughs. The other 50% are spread out through upstate New York.
Scott?
No, I'm good.
Alma and then Dylan?
I'd like to go on record right now that I am in favor of this. My husband, who has Parkinson's, has been with a specialist for 1 year on special medication, and not a darn thing changed. Didn't improve anything. He says, I can't do any more for you. I can't do any more for you. In the meantime, he's gotten a promotion to go work somewhere else. The doctors have nothing to help. We're just watching him going downhill. That's the reality. If this is one of the names up there is Parkinson's, I want to be on a bandwagon of the fastest one you got. Thank you.
You're welcome. Dylan?
It says you're trying to stick it out for 2 years till the market changes. What are you waiting for?
Right now, we're waiting for qualifying conditions to be added. We're hoping to see chronic pain. That usually opens up programs that we see in other states. There's 1 or 2 other conditions that we'd like to see added. We're thinking chronic pain would be the biggest. It would probably add maybe 15 to 20,000 more patients here in New York. And then we should start covering our overhead once we see about 5,000 patients in the organization. So,
B, then Kurt, and then Jalessa. Dylan, do you have another question? Okay.
If Akwesasne decides to do a vote and they do decide to produce this manufacturing plant itself, would this be considered direct competition with you, or is this something that you are looking at like a possibility of a partnership?
We haven't discussed that. I'm not looking at it as direct competition. There are 4 other organizations here in New York. We don't consider ourselves competition. We just want to see the program work as a whole. let everyone survive until the program can open up and be more open to other conditions and other people. I don't see it as a competition. I'm here to help. You know, if the community decides to legalize, you know, I don't know how it's actually going to work, but if you follow the New York State program, I'm here. I'll come up and help you guys. I don't consider anything, you know, competition. I started in New Jersey. I helped all other 6 organizations become operational. I couldn't afford to take those losses in New Jersey, so I exited. The Peckhams came to me, asked me to become part of their organization. I advised them not to do that. They didn't take my advice. Now we're burning $500,000 a month. So again, I'm here to help. Anything I can do for you guys, just ask me.
The only reason why is because it's like, I see the slides and it just shows that it's very investing, it's very challenging, high cost, highly regulated, it's too much work. I'm not seeing the positive of it.
Well, I think more of the positive has to do with the actual patient themselves. That's where the positive is. You know, and like Joe was saying, it's very labor intensive, very cost. Huh? It's very labor intensive, cost, actually almost cost prohibitive. They were saying they have a $500,000 a month expense, and they're bringing in $180,000. So if you do the math, you're losing money. But their commitment to the patients is what keeps them going, and that hopefully that New York State is going to lift some of the restrictions. And right now, we don't see, at least for a couple of years, of that happening. When we spoke yesterday, Joe said that there were a couple of businesses that are in danger of folding because the program is just, you know, it's very restrictive and prohibitive. So, you know, if you're thinking about this, there are a lot of things to think of. Kurt?
Indian Health Service, are they approved for this? Do you know anything about that?
I do not know anything.
They are
about
not, Kurt. No.
Are
They're
you-
federal.
Are you licensed doctor?
No, I'm not a licensed doctor. My background is I was funeral director for 12 years. Then I was doing medical imaging. The opportunity came for me in New Jersey to do this. I wanted to see what benefits were there for the patient. We were a nonprofit in New Jersey. So we were able to service that community. I saw the benefits. That's really what my passion was. Like I said, it was an opportunity that came to me, so I wanted to do that. And then I went into other states. But as everyone was saying, it is patient-focused. We had a patient that had a 12-year-old patient and hadn't spoken for 12 years, severe seizures. Within a week of taking our CBD product, she started speaking. It was amazing. We don't see those results often, but when you do see it, it's great. It really is.
So when you get a pill, you know, what is it, that THC?
Correct. It's THC and CBD, so you either have THC, which gives you the euphoric effect, that feeling of a high, or CBD. CBD is more anti-inflammatory, and you don't receive that high. And each product has to be 10 milligrams, not be any more than 10 milligrams in use.
Joelsa?
So pills, a vaporizer, so you can smoke it, or a tincture under the tongue.
Hold
So
on,
when
Kurt. Joelsa's next, and then you can ask a question.
So my question was, clearly it seems as though you're losing a lot of money at this time. And to be a profitable venture, in your opinion, what would have to change? You said the access to qualifying conditions for patients. What are the other 1 or 2 pieces of the New York State program that have to change before it's commercially viable and profitable endeavor?
Well, the big thing is access. You know, the more patients you see, the more revenue you're going to create, of course. The other thing is just the restrictive nature of the program. Security runs us, you know, it's a third of our operating budget. It's overdone, it's very restrictive, and they put in these security measures that don't make sense, such as 2 security companies monitoring your system. The transportation alone itself is very cost prohibitive. You need 2 employees in a vehicle at all times. It's just the restrictive nature of the
It's
program.
not the Colorado model.
No, absolutely not. East Coast is a lot different than Colorado, Washington, Oregon, even California. I'm looking at a venture in California right now, ran those numbers. The marijuana is actually being supplied to us for free from a grower, and we're going to feed our products there. That doesn't even look profitable at this time with the competition around the country. You know, a lot of people have the dominance now. It's difficult, it's challenging, but if you're looking at it from a patient base, it's very rewarding.
Kurt, and Nami, then William?
Why would I guess you say, support your idea of growing hemp? I could just stay on the black market. Your price is too high.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I saw a hydroponic store driving in, so I'm sure there's a lot of people here with more experience than myself. And if you do have it, maybe, you know, you can answer some of my questions. But, you know, you don't have the expense, and we're dealing with competition from black market. That's why we see 50% loss of our patient base. So receive the card, try our product, see the cost, then go back to the black market. You can get it anywhere.
Norman?
Yes, what is the cost say per patient for this medical marijuana?
The cost to the patient?
Yes.
Doctor visit, you need 2 doctor visits. Doctors are charging anywhere from $500 to $900 a visit. It's not covered by insurance, so that's out of pocket. Once they receive that recommendation, it's $50 to the state for a 2-year card, and then the cost of medication. The cost of the medication is anywhere from $120 to $2,000 a month, depending on how much you're taking.
So there's no, say, Indian Health Service don't pay, and how about Medicaid? No. So it's all, so
No
everything's
health
out of
insurance.
pocket.
Everything's out of pocket.
Right
It's not
now,
a-
it is, yes.
Wow.
Correct.
Well,
So until you see a federal change, it's going to stay out.
William?
I got 2 questions. Why, and in your honest opinion, I mean, since the the medical marijuana does work, why do you think the insurance companies won't cover it? Why do you think the states won't allow or the government allow the companies to cover it?
It's federally illegal. Some insurance companies are going to say that they're not going to cover it, and there's no scientific evidence that this actually works. It's not FDA approved, so insurance companies can say there's no need for us to cover this. That's what I'm thinking. Why would they take that cost if it's not scientifically proved or federal FDA approved?
And the other question is, you're talking about the expenses, high expenses with the low returns on the medical marijuana. The other thing is, do you think the other states that are doing really well is because they have the recreational marijuana there also?
The other states that are doing well, they have a higher patient. Colorado was very lax when they first began their program. There was no real regulation there. So a lot of people made their money in the beginning. They were allowed to grow on their own. You get so many patients on, you didn't have to have a warehouse. You could do this in your home. So a lot of people made their money before those full regulations come in. What I see now, as those regulations were implemented for medical and then recreational, I'd be getting calls from friends and associates. They couldn't do it. It was just too expensive for them. And then now we're seeing a lot of people going out of business in Colorado because of the competition. So, there's a few people making money in this industry. There's a few people making a lot of money in this industry, but it's rare. A lot of people are also struggling.
Okay, well, wait, hold on. Well, we're getting pressed for time, so we're gonna move on to our next presentation. But Joe, we'd like to ask you to stay, and for those community members who have questions, feel free to. Are you willing to stay? Okay. Next up, we have a presentation from the National Indian Cannabis Coalition, and I'm going to get Allyson Doctor to introduce our next guests.
Hello, Segon. Thank you for having us. I can't even hear if you can hear me. Thank you for having us. I think most of you in the room, I gave a hug on the way in. Allyson Doctor from the community.
My husband and I started the National Indian Cannabis Coaltion, co-founded it about 1.5 years ago. The reason that we stepped into this field was, well, twofold. One, because we were already working in the industry. We were working on state license applications on behalf of a group of investors. It is, and the gentleman that just spoke did a great job of explaining, it is a very difficult process to go through. To say that you have to jump through a couple of hoops is a significant understatement. So at the end of 2014, when that memo came out and the news hit, and we had lots of discussion throughout Indian country about tribes can start growing pot on their land. I mean, that was the headline that we saw. Having probably a little over 1 year of experience in this industry, we decided that we could either do nothing and step back, or we could do something to be able to help provide Indian country with a way to be able to access good information. Are we always doing everything right? We have no idea. I think we're too early in the stages to know. But I think some of the things that we have done right is being able to be active throughout Indian country, speaking to people about the industry, speaking to people about the challenges, about the economic development opportunities. And that's what we're here to talk to you about today. So we have 2 people that are going to be speaking. Our general counsel is Lael Echo-Hawk. She is Pawnee. She's from Oklahoma, by way of Alaska, and we thank her very much for being here. And then Jeff Doctor is going to speak afterwards as well. Thank you. Now, Braden's going to show us how to work with Mondo, of course.
Up on my slide. Good morning. My name is Lael Echo-Hawk. I'm a member of the Pawnee Nation of Oklahoma. I'm also a descendant of the Akwesasne people in Alaska. And I'm very much appreciative for the tribe allowing me to come and present to you. I understand that this is sort of a rare thing, and I do appreciate being asked to come. So I'm a lawyer, and I apologize in advance if I get really lawyerly at you today, but one of the things that we've seen over the past, since 2014, since the memo came out, is sort of this hysteria around the cannabis industry. And I want to be clear here that when we talk about, when we say, I use the word cannabis, and I do that purposefully, cannabis includes medical marijuana, we have sort of 3 categories of cannabis. Cannabis is a plant. You can derive, there are a number of various derivatives of marijuana. The 3 things that we talk about in the industry are recreational marijuana, medicinal marijuana, and hemp. And so we're going to be talking about these 3 things and trying to keep them separate because I think that's important when you're considering, sort of what to do. So we spoke already about the memo. The memo came out in into 2014, but it had been written and released in October of 2014 without sort of any interaction with tribes at all. I don't know how to work the board. Okay. And what did the memo do? The memo just told U.S. district attorneys in states that they can work with their tribes, like they're working with their states, to decide whether or not, and help the tribe and the U.S. district attorney decide whether or not it's worth the U.S. district attorney's time to enforce the Controlled Substances Act, which says that marijuana is illegal. So I want to be also clear that today, marijuana, including hemp, is federally illegal, and you can be prosecuted and sent to jail for engaging in this industry. Now, we have, and we'll talk about this, we have a number of states, obviously, that are legalized, and I think, we've sort of at a tipping point now in the country. There's over 25 states that have legalized marijuana in some form. That does not stop the federal government from going in and enforcing. And in fact, you see raids, in California and different dispensaries. But the federal government, even though California is just an example state, they have legalized medicinal marijuana and have recreational marijuana on the agenda. So what happened in December just created sort of a mess. And that was one of the reasons why the National Indian Cannabis Coaltion came into being, because it was just a lot of misunderstanding about what could actually happen. What can tribes actually do? So what tribes can actually do is create, if you're in a state, and we'll talk about this little more detail. If you're in a state that has some form of legalized marijuana, then likely, you as a tribe should be able to legalize marijuana, cannabis, within your reservation and develop a robust regulatory regime, which means you have to do similar to what New York State has done. Develop your own independent regulatory rules, regulations. You can use the states, you can do your own, but it has to be deemed by the federal government to be a robust regulatory regime. You have to have tracking from seed to sale. You have to have surveillance. You have to have all the things that the gentleman just spoke about. You have to do that as a tribe if you're going to legalize within your tribal lands. These are the states that have permit medical use of marijuana. Interesting, Montana has had it for a long time, and now they've taken it off as legal in marijuana medicinal, but they have a referendum to do recreational. And we have the states that have legalized the recreational use of medicinal marijuana. And this is important because these two states, particularly, and Oregon, Washington, Colorado, and Oregon, is where you see tribes beginning to legalize and actually engage in the industry in a successful way, which is new. So these are the states with legalized marijuana in some form, and all the green is where tribal lands are located. The bright green is where you have legalized medicinal and recreational. The dark green is where you only have medicinal, and pink is where there's no tribal lands. So I'm going to move past some of this stuff. So one of the reasons why it's interesting for tribal governments to think about legalizing marijuana is because you see states supplementing their budgets significantly by the taxes that they charge on marijuana. So on cannabis. So Colorado last year made $699 million in total sales. They got $76 million in 2014 in taxes and $135 million in taxes in 2015. Washington State taxes last year were $70 million. And so as a government, one of the things that should be considered is what would be the tax imposed and what would the benefit be there in terms of revenue? Yes, sir.
That's on, is that combined medical and recreational, or is that just recreational?
In Washington State, there's no tax on medicinal, so that's just on recreational, and likewise with Colorado. But the tax is very, very high. Washington State is now about 37%. It was upwards of 45% on the product. So Jeff is going to talk about hemp, and so I'm going to move past all this, because what I want to talk about is sort of what's going on federally. We have, in the federal government, there's a number of bills pending. So the marijuana industry, because we're at this sort of tipping point, the federal government is trying to figure out what to do. We have huge banking problems. Banks cannot touch, there are a couple banks that do, but for the most part, banks don't want to have anything to do with the cannabis industry because it is illegal. You can be charged under the RICO Act. The Federal Reserve, which is what a bank has to tap into, they have to get a master account so that you can move money around. The Federal Reserve has refused to give accounts to banks that are cannabis banks. So banking is a huge problem. They're trying to figure that out right now. So it's a very, very cash-intense industry, which requires a lot of money being spent on security. There are ATM companies popping up everywhere because it's cash. You have to have cash when you go in. They have to give you change in cash. You have to pay your taxes in cash. Everything is cash because we have this banking problem. The other thing that's happening right now, obviously, are the elections, and we don't know how that's going to impact both legislation and the administration. You have to remember that all of these policies that come out of the Department of Justice they're just memos. They're just memos written by a guy who has some authority. But say we have a Republican candidate, president elected, he could change all of that. They could change those memos, and then the states legalize and try to have to figure out what to do with that. We also have a number of people in Congress that are interested in legalizing, they're certainly interested in bringing the industry out of this sort of dark, like very cash-based. You want to track, you want to be able to track the income, you want to track the money, you want to make a safe industry. People do get robbed. So we've seen a number of pieces of legislation happen. There are two in particular that have to do with Indian country. One in the House provides for a kind of a safety net. So for tribes that are interested in participating in this industry, that piece of legislation says you won't risk losing your federal funding if you're in a state with a legalized regime. So if New York obviously would qualify. That developed because tribes have been worried that every time you sign for a grant, you have a 638 contract or you have a contract with IHS, you agree not to violate federal law. By engaging in the cannabis industry, you actually are violating federal law. So this would create a safety net for that. Alternatively, there is another piece of legislation that a congressman from Oklahoma has put forward, and that piece of legislation says that if you as a tribe engage in the cannabis industry, that all your federal funding will be cut. A couple months ago, well, I guess about a month ago, he was trying to attach that bill to another sort of must-pass Tribal Law and Order Act in the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, and he got, thankfully Senator Murkowski, who's a Republican from Alaska, she said she didn't support it, he's a Republican. But you could see that there is this sort of, this split, and for Indian country, it's one of the things Jeff and I are active in, is making sure that there's parity. The other thing that the Pocan bill did, which is the one that would protect your federal funding, it also would authorize Indian Health Services to doctors to make recommendations and to talk to patients about the use of medical marijuana. Right now, if you have an IHS clinic and you cannot use, you can't prescribe, you can't discuss the use of medical marijuana. If, without it being legalized, if you decide to move forward and open up a dispensary under IHS, you need to be very careful. If you have an IHS clinic, compact, you need to be very careful about that because you risk losing some coverage under the Federal Tort Claims Act that you would normally have under those agreements. So there's a number of other bills, and I think Jeff is going to talk about some of them. One thing I want to point out is that vets, last year there was a bill, it was a military appropriations bill. Both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House, agreed to some language that would allow the department to let vets participate in and make recommendations about the use of medical marijuana. But if you guys remember the sit-in that happened over gun control a couple weeks ago, when that was happening, the House Republicans took this provision out of that bill, and when it went to the president's signature, this was eliminated. So there are no federal agencies at this point, federal healthcare systems that permit their doctors to make recommendations or discuss this with their clients. Which, if you think about it, makes things very difficult for these doctors, because a lot of times if you have PTSD or you have pain, they're prescribing opiates, and opiates don't necessarily go very well with marijuana. And there's a lot of science behind. There's studies that indicate that in some cases the use of medicinal marijuana products are actually serve the patient better than opiates. But at this point in time, that's sort of what they're restricted to. So the other thing that I find interesting is that the National Institute of Health has despite cannabis and hemp, including hemp, being illegal, the National Institute of Health was awarded a patent on cannabinoid. So CBD. The gentleman was talking about CBD and THC. CBD is another property, and it's something that in this space people have found to be very successful in terms of sleep, anxiety, pain management. CBD, some of what we're learning is that some of the best quality CBD comes from industrial hemp, and I think Jeff is going to talk a little bit more about that. But despite it being illegal, the federal government has a patent on it, so if you want to use this product later, you have to pay the federal government for it. And a couple years ago, they issued a license to a company to study CBD as a neuroprotectant, to study for CTE, which is the concussion. A lot of football players get that concussion syndrome, and it makes their brains deteriorate. But they're the only company that they're allowing to do that. But you can see there's this shift happening where people are beginning to understand that there's some science behind this, and the federal government is making some money off of that. So right now in Congress, earlier this year, they sent Congress sent a letter to the DEA and said, we want you to consider descheduling marijuana. And the DEA responded and said that they would do that, they would consider it, they would have an answer back to Congress by the end of this year. So that's pending out there. Interesting though, earlier last month, mid-month, there was a hearing where the DEA said that it is now open to descheduling CBD specifically because there's no risk for abuse. I mean, it comes from, there's less than 3% THC, there's no psychoactive effect when it comes from CBD. And the FDA right now is in the final stages of a study for a pediatric epilepsy pill or medication that's CBD based. So things are happening at the federal level, hasn't necessarily trickled into Congress. I mean, they're trying, but it's just not getting anywhere. It definitely won't this Congress, depending on how the elections shake out, we'll see what happens next year. So the other thing I want to touch on is sort of the logistics behind this. Insurance, he was talking about insurance earlier. Insurance companies don't want to touch cannabis operations, or if they do, you definitely pay a much higher premium. In 2015, Lloyd's of London decided that they would not fund any cannabis-based or cannabis operations. They're a huge, massive insurance company. So there are lots of little pop-up insurance companies, but the premium is much higher. And this is all because it's federally illegal. This is an illegal substance. Gaming and marijuana. In Nevada, you can only be in the marijuana cannabis industry, or you can only be in the gaming industry. And why is that? Well, the federal FinCEN, which is the enforcement arm of the IRS, Department of Treasury, has said that casinos are financial institutions. And as a financial institution, you are responsible for completing suspicious activity reports of anyone, an employee of, an owner of, a cannabis operation. These are very costly. It requires a lot of resources, and that's one of the reasons why banks don't want to deal with the cannabis industry, because they've got to have about two extra full-time employees to meet these requirements if you're in the cannabis industry. So there's a question: how do tribes that have casinos and enter into this and want to be in the cannabis industry, how do you meet these requirements and still keep costs down? In Indian country, we've had a lot of activity. We've had a lot of raids. We've had tribes that are saying that they're going to open. Passamaquoddy in Maine, they're working on a hemp project. In Washington State, you have 3 tribes that have 2 tribes that have dispensaries. One has a medical testing facility and has now announced that it's going to open a grow operation. Las Vegas Paiutes are working on a dispensary, although I heard that their bank accounts got shut down, so they're trying to figure out what to do about that. Warm Springs is about to open a couple of very large grows and then open retail stores throughout Oregon. And then you've got Flandreau Santee Sioux, who wanted to open a hot resort in South Dakota, which I don't know if It turned out not to be the greatest idea. They ended up having to burn their own plants, and 2 days ago, their consultants, non-native consultants from Colorado, were indicted and charged with criminal activity, more than 10 pounds. Somebody's going to jail. But that's because they were in a state that doesn't have any form of legalization. They would have been an island of marijuana within a state, and that state does not want to have anything to do with marijuana. And so you see the fallout. So I always like to say I'm just the lawyer. I'm just here to help tribes gather information and then implement whatever decision the community makes. And so these are some considerations. The federal program, one of the things that sort of really slowed down development is tribes being concerned that if they engage in the industry, that they're putting their federal funding at risk. A lot of federal agencies have sort of spoken to this in subtle ways, but again, because it's federally illegal, it's a very tricky, it's tricky navigating this. There are issues with what is the definition of tribal land, what qualifies if you're in a public law, if you're in a state that has public law 280, but can a state enforce? There are a lot of resources. For a tribe to do this, you need to develop the robust regulatory regime, which requires significant amount of attorney time, and then you have to develop a regulatory body, much like your gaming commission, and they have to be monitoring this carefully. Otherwise, you risk being raided and shut down by the federal government. Alternatively, tribes have worked for a long time in gaming, co-regulating with the federal government. We know how to do it. There are ways to make things cheaper. I mean, you heard from the gentleman from New York. Tribes can write their own code. There doesn't need to be this, I can't even imagine how big the New York Cannabis Commission or whatever it is, how many bodies do they have. And so there are ways to keep costs down in a way that might be more cost effective in tribal land. So, there are considerations on all sides. So I'm going to let Jeff talk. I know I just dumped a lot of information, and then I assume we'll take questions after you.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Jeff Doctor. I'm now the current Executive Director of the National Indian Cannabis Coalition. I want to thank you for allowing us to be able to speak to you this morning. To bring you this information, what's happening in Indian country and what's happening in the cannabis industry around the country. As Allyson mentioned earlier, we have been involved in the cannabis industry for about the last couple of years. This all came about as our idea of how can we be a voice for Indian country? How can we help Indian country? How can we help educate tribes? How can we be proactive about this industry? As we try and learn from history and what we've done over the years as tribes and tribal communities is learn from our mistakes. And we really felt that we needed to give a voice to Indian country in Washington, D.C., with Congress and the Senate, and on the executive level, along with the presidential office, to be able to say, hey, tribes are here, we're economic development operators, we know how to regulate ourselves, we know how to do these kind of things, so we just want to make sure it's important that we can give support to tribes and tribal community, tribal leaders around the nation to be able to make informed, proper decisions about the cannabis industry. Let me make sure I'm going the right way here. So as Lael had mentioned, these are just kind of an overview of where marijuana is now legal in over 25 states. There's 6 more states that are going on the ballot, either for medicinal and or recreational in November. So potentially by the end of November, we'll have 30 states in the United States that have some form of cannabis operations in this country. Lael had this map as well, and is, just a little more overview. So when we talk about the elections coming up, and it's just very important for Indian country to understand, who's on our side and who's not. We're not here to make anyone choose on either side, but we just want to let people know that where our presidential nominees stand on this issue and where they stand on it for Indian country. President nominee Clinton is for certain declassification, moving cannabis or marijuana from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 2, declassifying down to a Schedule 2 and making it more accessible for folks around the country and patients needing to get that medical kind of care. The Republican nominee on the other side of this is for it on some level, but not completely beneficial for tribes, as some of the history you folks may know about his stance with the tribal communities. I'll leave it at that. So what do we do? And what are we working on a daily basis for Indian country when we say we want to be the voice for Indian country and helping along with this industry? So I live and work in Washington, D.C. I'm based there now. I work alongside with Lael. Allyson is also with us at certain times, and she's not here helping you folks, or she's not here out in Colorado helping with our daughter. So I work hand in hand directly on Capitol Hill with congressional offices that work on the different CARES Acts, the veterans bills that have been introduced, different congressional offices that are trying to introduce legislation and policy into get those bills introduced under the floor of the House or the Senate, and to be able to make sure that we have those relationships moving forward for Indian countries. They say, hey, make sure that we have inclusion. And that's what I mean when we're trying to be proactive. We want to make sure that Indian country or tribes, tribal communities are designated in those bills, because no one is advocating on behalf of them. So that's why we feel it's important that we come and be able to talk to folks like yourselves and communities and be able to let you know this is why we feel it's important. We want your feedback. We want you to be able to tell us what your concerns are as a tribe and tribal community. We say, this might be beneficial to us. This is what, we need help. We need you to help push on this issue, whether it's working with New York State on the state level, local levels. We try and do the gamut of it. But the importance of why we're trying to do it on the federal level is because when this does go federal and it's federally recognized tribes, and back to my point of proactive, we want to make sure that we are at a greater advantage as tribal communities to be able to take this as a true economic development opportunity, whether it's medicinal marijuana, whether it's recreational marijuana, or industrial hemp, and be on the forefront and potentially be a leader for this industry. And we can do that for economic development. So we work on different bills daily. We've helped to introduce a bill with a couple of members of Congress last fall on behalf of our efforts, and that bill is mostly for industrial hemp. This is kind of you kind of heard it from the gentleman from New York. You've heard it from a little bit of Lael of what the risks are. Kind of what back to what Ron, couple of things, and what Ron mentioned, the risk versus reward, and what Eric was saying, and just why it's important. And everything ties back to what we're doing with this legislation and policy and trying to advocate it, because as tribes and tribal communities are federally recognized, all of our funding and our town hall is truly Washington, D.C. So all the federal funding that concerns healthcare, education, policing, schools, whatever it comes from, whether through the Department of Interior, Bureau of Indian Affairs, all the regulatory agencies that are based in D.C., where we have to go voice our opinions and get our funding from, we have to be able to protect all your tribal interest to be able to do this business properly. We don't want to see any tribe fail. It just doesn't help any of us as tribal members and tribal community folks and tribal leaders to be able to go backwards on it. This is why it's important what we believe in, what we're trying to do on our mission. Maybe I'll get this thing right before I finish. So here's some of the current marijuana legislation that has been introduced over the last year. There's been a lot of different bills that have gone on, a lot of different folks, like I said, that we're working with, that, whether it's banking, and banking is definitely a big issue. And I'll get to that momentarily. These are some of the federal tribal draft legislation that we have helped try to introduce in Congress on a daily basis. These These are some of our positions with to some of the bills that have been introduced and then to some that are trying to go backwards. As Lael mentioned, whether it's the Veterans Bill, we have the senator from Oklahoma that is trying to take that away, the opportunity for what the Department of Justice memo came out in 2014 and stated. We're working to fight against that. And some of the other information that's come out in the last year concerning, I heard some of the questions earlier coming out to Medicare and insurance and who's looking to be able to work with this and some of the research that is now being done. There is some Medicare Part D prescription data demonstrates once a medical marijuana law has been implemented, there is significant decrease in prescriptions filled by Medicare Part D enrollees, which marijuana could serve as a clinical alternative. The national overall reductions in Medicare program enrollee spending when states implemented Medicaid marijuana laws were estimated at $165 million per year in 2013. Well, what does that mean for tribes? What does that mean for tribal communities? Well, maybe if you have a tightly regulated cannabis industry here in the community, will that cut down potentially, giving medicine to patients, giving options for patients that need the care, and potentially reducing your overall cost and reliance on the government, whether it's Indian Health Service, I heard someone mention that earlier, and just bringing that down to better maintaining your funds and being able to use those funds and divert those funds to other opportunities here in the community. Public health impact in states that legalize medicinal use of marijuana. Painkiller prescriptions dropped on an average by 1,800 daily doses filled each year per doctor. And do we want, when you think of medicinal care or cannabis or, what do we want to be able to provide the community, our elders, folks for care of life, what is the true options, what is the true possibilities that this medicine can potentially provide? And it's just, as the gentleman said and Lael said, is the research there? No. There's one university here in the United States, which is the University of Mississippi, that has been contracted by the federal government for the past, I believe, 20 years. And they do medical research on this. They go to a very tightly controlled facility at the University of Mississippi, and they've been doing research on this, but they don't give out a lot of the statistics and things that go on, but we're working with folks also to, how do we learn how to, the research part of it. We're working with other opportunities and other universities to be able to document this so that we can take this information and continually build on why this can be a positive for tribes in Indian country. As Lael said, we mentioned the Military Construction Veteran Affairs Act. We did see a positive in that, and then when it got taken back out just a few weeks ago, so we'll continue with that struggle to move that, help reverse that bill and move that forward. So hemp. What is hemp? Industrial hemp. How is it different, from medicinal, recreational? Hemp goes back all the way to the beginning of history here in America and how it deals with tribes and tribal communities. We were using it to pay taxes and do trading when the first colonies were first issued here, obtained here, came over to the lands, and then it's gone to, it really got descheduled in 1934 when everything along with this, due to a family in Chicago that ran newspapers that were cotton mills, logging, different stuff. They got this bill and got industrial hemp declassified because it is a very, very efficient and cheap product to grow. So, as the second point says, we've been working on a farm bill with Congressman Pocan from Wisconsin to be able to introduce this bill on the House floor and the Senate floor, to be able to work through getting that passed for tribes to be able to go after the industrial hemp market. Like I said, what is industrial hemp? Industrial hemp can consist of its agriculture and economic development. And what do I mean by that is, it's farming. And we've done an internal study at our organization to take the 566 federally recognized tribes, all the land that we have here in the United States, and how can we efficiently use that land? So 30% of the hemp market is grown in Canada, 70% is grown in Europe. Obviously, as we know, it's not legal here in the United States as of yet, but as the DOJ memo said in 2014, tribes can potentially dip their toe in any of these industries. So what does that mean for tribes? We can do this through agriculture. And how do we present this to communities? Because we know how to agriculture, we know how to farm, we know how to take advantage of the lands that we have and be able to access that land and turn it into growing our own hemp, processing it, manufacturing it, and turning it into value-added goods. And that is going to allow for self-sustainability, using our sovereignty, our tax advantages as federally recognized tribes to be able to take a hold of this industry potentially and create jobs. How many jobs will that create? It just depends on how far the scope of the industry goes. And I have some examples further down the line here. So recently, as of this past year, 28 states have removed the barriers to produce industrial hemp. So you can see the ones in purple are the ones that have considered this already. The ones in non-purplish color have not completely gone that route as of yet. New York is one of them. This could be a potential opportunity with the amount of land that is here, the amount of economic development that this could create from putting the seed in the ground to going on to, like I said earlier, manufacturing, production, and turning it into distribution, putting it to products that are being used around the world now. And it's $1 billion crop. And this is kind of what I'm getting to. I'll move to the side a little bit so everybody can see it over here. There is multiple uses for hemp around the world. And what can be provided and what can be turned into. And this is just one example of what is out there. Hemp can be turned into, there's a couple examples. BMW is using it in car parts now. They're making hempcrete to be able to use instead of concrete. Hemp is one of the most strongest fibers known to man. And it can be used for so many different things. They're building houses with it, cars with it, so many different stuff. They use it in healthcare, health foods. There's so many ways to be able to diversify and grow this as a true economic development for Indian countries. So go back to my point of the internal study we did and taking with all the federally recognized land as Indian country, potentially in this country, we could control as Native people 95% of the hemp market in the world with who we are for farming and economic development possibilities as Native people. Someone asked about Indian Health Service earlier. Where is their stance on it? Where is their position? What are they trying to do? And this goes back to a few years back that, Indian Health Service obviously, is tied to the federal government and their funding and what their needs to be able to serve tribal communities around the country. We work with them currently to be able to keep them updated on what's happening, trying to continue to forge those relationships, say why this is important for Indian country, why it's important for tribal communities to be able to get into this arena and being able to do it the right way. And our sovereignty. This is who we are, this is what we believe in, and this is why we created this organization to continue to promote our sovereignty and to be able to promote the economic development possibilities and self-sustainability to wean ourselves off those federal government programs and to provide better economic possibilities for community members down the road. So again, these are some of the folks that we're working with on our draft legislation, continue to enforce this on a daily basis, being able to meet with folks in the government and the different government agencies, and continue to promote this for Indian country in the most positive manner. And this is how you can get a hold of us, nicdc.org. We're here to be able to answer and educate, as I said, on any type of these questions, and we will best inform you and keep everyone up to date as much as possible. And really the biggest reason why we do what we do is just, like I said before, something we believe in and something that tribes and Indian country can be involved in and it can really be an economic development boost for communities around the country, and we try and promote it in the right way, doing it the right way. So the folks that we work with in Washington, D.C., whether it's the Senator's office, the Chief of Staff, the congressional folks, all they ask that we do it the right way so that it doesn't detour us as Native communities to be able to detract us from being able to do this business properly and to really move it forward. I know we're on a time constraint, so I hope I've given enough good information. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of different questions and whatnot, so thank you for giving us the time today to be able to come here and present to you. Very much appreciated from Allyson, Lael, and the gentleman from New York. I think he's still here.
Yeah.
Joe.
Juanita?
Jack, what would be the way that the tribe can get around the doctor prescription? If IHS can't prescribe, any IHS doctors can't prescribe, would we have to open a separate clinic totally and pay a doctor out of TGF funds to prescribe?
So if you all don't know that, Allyson is our healthcare expert in this industry. She's done healthcare for many, many years.
You're healthcare expert, I don't know about that. That's a good question, and I think that a lot of the questions that are posed today, from the business perspective, I feel like those are a little bit more they're a little more concrete and a little bit easier to give a yes or no answer to. But when it comes to being able to look at this from the access side of thing and how patients are going to be able to access, if we're looking at medicinal marijuana specifically, that is not something that I think we can answer today, because what is going to be required is a robust set of regulations. And that really ties back to the community. And I think we're hearing, I think a lot of people today are here because you're interested in one way or the other, what are we gonna do? Does the community want this or no? That has to be clearly spelled out when the regulations are written.
Norman?
Allyson, wouldn't we have to go through a tribal state compact in order to manufacture, grow it?
I'd love to pose that question, Lael.
I've never heard anybody talk about it yet.
Yes, and so there is a couple of tribes that have done that in Washington State, that they have made a compact with the state, and I'll let Lael speak to that for a moment, for the two tribes that are represented with those compacts in Washington.
So there are, Washington State started this model, and actually the memo came from some momentum in Washington State, tribes advocating to be able to participate in the industry. So in Washington State, the Washington State legislature passed a piece of legislation that authorizes the governor to enter into marijuana compacts with the tribes within their state. Now, you don't have to go that way, but the reason that they did was because Washington State Washington State industry was locked down. So in order to buy in and out of the state industry, you had to be licensed by the Washington State government. Well, tribes in Washington State, we're not going to let the Washington State license them and come in and enforce. So they worked out this deal. The best part of these compacts is, I think, an agreement that if there are any challenges to a tribe's operation or to the substance of the agreement, which pertains to the cannabis industry generally, that the state agrees to defend that challenge. So where's that challenge going to come from? It's going to come from the federal government. So you have a compact, you have a contractual agreement between the state and the tribe, that if the federal government challenges the compact or any of these operations, that the state is your partner in that litigation. Now there are ways to I've been talking to tribes, say, in California, as they're thinking about this referendum that's on the ballot for November to legalize recreational marijuana in California. If you get in at the beginning, as they're drafting regulations, there's potential for there to be regulations or included in the law or the referendum that if a tribe has their own robust regulatory system, then that's good enough, and that they can then participate in and out of the state system. Because so that's the goal, right? If you're a tribe and you're engaged in this industry, you want to be able to service people off the reservation. You want to be able to buy and sell product. And I know New York is pretty restrictive, so that opportunity might not be available just yet. But when the market opens up, you want to make sure that as a tribe, if this is an industry that you're interested in, that you have access, that you can buy, you can buy flour from the gentleman over there, process it yourself, and sell it to a dispensary. You want to have that full access. And so that's what those compacts did in Washington State. Looks like there might be a similar compact in Oregon, and California is kicking it around.
In other words, you're
Wait,
saying.
hold on. Kurt, and then back to Norman, and then Barbara.
The hemp program, like you're saying, like when I was growing up, it was, anything that we were able to manufacture from the land was ours. Your hemp program is, like you're saying, it was a trade item. So you can't go back to federal drug, the people that monitor our food and tell them we eat this.
Potentially we can, because it also goes back to treaty rights. When it comes to fishing and farming and different things that are in our treaty rights, we continually remind the folks in Congress and on Capitol Hill that these are our rights. This is why it's important that we're doing what we're doing, be able to push that initiative to make sure that they realize and understand, because sometimes they don't understand that issue. They don't realize when we sit and talk to them and say, hey, this is what needs to be done. This is what we've done for years. This is what is supposed to be ours, and this is why it's important that you need to recognize this and be able to put this in the bills that are being introduced so that Indian country is inclusive with this industry, so that we don't have those questions, but we have to be able to give a clear path so that tribes and tribal communities can do and engage in this industry.
The problem is that hemp is included in the definition of marijuana, which is just silliness. I always say, it might not be appropriate, but I'll say it anyways. You can roll around naked in hemp all day long and not get high, right? But because they
Thank you. Sorry.
Just a word of caution.
I tried to behave. I was doing a good job.
All you gotta do is open the door and
I think we all needed that. So one of the goals and one of the things that we've been working on is pushing these bills, advocating for legislation that removes hemp from the definition of marijuana that is in the Controlled Substances Act. If you do that, then all of this goes away as it comes to hemp, which makes a lot of sense. But some of the history that we've learned is that hemp was included in marijuana because people were making hemp paper, and it competed with some rich, like a Rockefeller kind of family who sold paper from trees. And so when they were working on this definition, they made sure that hemp was included so that you couldn't, they wouldn't have that competition. But there's no, I think everybody is pretty comfortable with the fact that, hemp itself as a product isn't, there's no, as the DEA says, there's no risk of abuse. And the benefits that come medicinally, just product-wise, the Congressional Research Service issues a report every year, and I read it so you guys don't have to. But hemp as an agricultural commodity, and it estimates that hemp would be the second highest grossing product just underneath tobacco per acre in the United States, once it's descheduled.
It is now the 12 o'clock hour, and I'd like to ask permission to continue on with this meeting if there are no objections.
I'll make the motion. Go that way.
Huh?
I'll make the motion, let's go that way.
To continue on? Okay. Does anybody have any objections to continuing on with this meeting till the 1 o'clock hour? Hearing none? We don't need to do a motion on this. Norman, and then Barb, and then Mr. Mitchell over there.
Okay, the way you're talking now, if we have the right to grow our own marijuana and hemp, and if we're gonna process it, you're talking thousands and thousands of dollars to put into these facilities, and then you turn around and sell it to people for a high price also, and nothing helps them to get that marijuana. And if you took it off the reservation, wouldn't the state be right down your throat at the time? It's, in other words, the reservation itself can't support this industry. So you would have to go to a tribal state compact in order to be able to get it off. Am I correct in assuming that?
So to your first point, when it comes to industrial hemp specifically, this industry can be inclusive for all federally recognized tribes because it doesn't take bricks and mortars, it doesn't take a huge operation just to be able to put a seed in the ground and it gives tribes the opportunity to be able to make it economically feasible to introduce this kind of economic development project into tribal communities. So we can take the land out here, start growing it, potentially whether it's not making products here, maybe it's exportation, there's different kind of laws and different things you can navigate that way potentially. And I'll let you answer the
Still
second.
ends up the same way as tobacco.
One of the, so two things. You raised a great point. I'm sure the gentleman from New York would, he probably has to buy and sell from a New York licensed another party if you're going to do that. So being a tribe, if you're not going to agree, which I would not advise a tribe to do, to agree to be licensed and subject to enforcement by the New York State, then likely you would have to do some sort of agreement or make changes to regulation. Part of, I think, the question that's being posed, it'd be very interesting to see, to get a study done that analyzes, what are the actual needs? What are the cost of bureaucracy in the state of New York compared to a cost of a bureaucracy here at a tribal level? Smaller, leaner, same, still high standards, which there are industry standards that I think everyone is getting comfortable with. But you produce the same sort of industry standards, and then as a tribe, your robust regulatory regime may not have to be as bloated as we've seen states. I mean, in Colorado and Washington, when they first started, it was overkill, way overkill. And so the past couple of legislative sessions, we've seen them dial back on some of those regulations. They were burdensome, they were making things cost prohibitive. And so as you move forward as a community, I think that's one of the things that could be analyzed. Is there cost? Is the cost going to be as high if you do it here as a tribal project versus having to go out and jump through all the state hoops? And I don't think you know the answer until you conduct the study.
Barb?
I guess I'm a little confused here. Now, the states that passed legislation to be able to sell marijuana and grow it, whatever, but yet you're saying that it's illegal federally. I thought that everybody had to listen to the federal government, whether you're a state or a tribe. Am I wrong in that?
Legally, you're right.
Okay, so if the tribe passes this law, it still doesn't make it legal.
Not federally correct. That is correct.
So they could come in here and, like you said before, raid us.
Everyone runs that risk.
That's what they did with gaming.
Everybody runs that risk, even the state licensed
Well, I guess
facilities.
I can't understand. How do the states get away with it?
There's basically, the federal government has basically taken a look away approach. As long as the states have this robust regulatory regime, and I sent Dale the PowerPoint, so if you want to know more about what that requires, he can get you the PowerPoint. But there's a number of issues that they have to address. And if the federal government sees that the state or tribe has set up that robust regulatory regime that protects kids and keeps out criminal activity and all of those things, if they meet those requirements, then what the memos say, and these are just memos, they say that then they'll basically look away and they won't expend resources on enforcing enforcing the Controlled Substances Act and marijuana laws in those particular areas. Now in 2014, there was a farm bill, and it prohibits the DEA from enforcing the Controlled Substances Act as it pertains to hemp as long as it is in a state that authorizes cultivation of hemp for research and industrial purposes.
Kelly?
To answer my question, Ron.
Oh, okay,
He answered mine too.
Kurt, and then Monica.
Is there any nations out there producing the pill?
Not as of yet. There's only 2 dispensaries that have been opened in Washington State, Oregon, not Oregon yet, and then they're looking to produce a grow operation indoor facility in Washington State.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm getting at too, if there was a nation that was producing a pill, and on the other page, we're trying to make $1 off all, I would rather get our people better and mentally equipped to go forward. So if there was a way to channel resources into a nation that makes the pill and then, making us feel better, so instead of this dollar thing, I want to get my kids better. You got kids there, like you're saying, with studies and stuff like that. If there was a way to get in touch with the National Indian Congress, is there a group of natives out there sitting together at the table?
That's what we do in DC. We advocate on behalf of those issues. So not just the hemp, we do advocate on behalf of the medical part of the industry. We understand that it's important for patient care and to give alternatives and to be able to have that medicine, the access to that medicine for tribal community members. So we continue to work on that as part of these bills to make sure that Indian country is included in those bills and make sure that we have a seat at the table. And that's why we're trying to be proactive with this industry through our organization to be able to continue to remind members of Congress or folks at the state level or the local level why it's important to tribes have come so far over the years, as you all know. And so we need to continue that fight, and that's what we do on a daily basis as well, to make sure that we get also that tribal community members get access to that medicine at some point.
Are you talking to
Wait,
the United Nations?
Monica, then William, Amber, then back to you, Kurt.
I just wanted to make a point when Norman brought it up when he talked about doing the compact with the governor. It's just like the gaming compact, correct? With the gaming compact that we have in New York State is we follow these regulations which gave us the ability to have the casino here. So if we went the same process with marijuana, it would be the governor would have to be willing to agree to do the compact. That's the glitch there.
It is the glitch at the moment, but that's also, on the backside of that, is why we're trying to be proactive about this. So when it does go, we feel as an organization that potentially by 2020, this industry will be federally regulated, and because we are federally recognized tribes, if we're being proactive now to make sure that we are included in all those bills and all those pieces of legislation to make sure that maybe we don't have to go down that road in a few years, but if you're doing your research and getting yourself set up and doing it as a tribal nation, setting your own regulatory board and looking at what is the potential down the road as they're looking to do, commission the study, that when it goes federal, we're not beholden potentially to those state compacts as federally recognized tribes.
The other difference with that is that when the compacts were first entered into, there was no gaming in New York, and so tribes wanted exclusivity. The compact today, if you were to do that and go to the governor and say, hey, we want to enter this compact to you, that's equitable, right? We're like any other citizen or any other business in New York, and you should respect our tribal sovereignty. You should respect what we're trying to do as a nation. So there's a little bit, it's a little bit different because you're just asking for this. You're asking him to respect your sovereignty and allow you the same opportunity as everybody else in the state.
The only thing I'm sorry is with this tribe, we have the worst gaming contract. So if they go for any other kind of compact, they better be a lot smarter.
William?
That's it.
Well, since the hemp, since it's basically like corn and soybeans and stuff like that, same exact same thing. Why would they put that as a Schedule 1 drug? Why did they do that to it? And the other thing is, if they do take it off the list to where it's no longer Schedule 1, then it's basically like having soy and corn. So why would we need a compact to grow hemp with the state? If it's basically because the state doesn't have every farmer in the state that grows corn and sells their soy and stuff like that under compact and stuff like that. So why would we need this?
So, the first part of it goes back to history of 1934 when this family from Chicago wanted to be
yo, honey,